the best brands we see are the ones that always try and take care of the customer and create a positive experience. They're not trying to nickel and dime or trying to save money or trying to be very frugal with refunds or replacements. That they're very generous because they know that even if a customer leaves them, if they have a good experience, they may not come back, but that they may tell their friends that they had a good experience.
Welcome to Blue Ocean by StartOps. Each episode, I sit down with leaders in consumer brand supply chain, finance, and CX to talk about the problems they're facing and the solutions they're using or building. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Cushing, the founder of StartOps. With me here today is Jonathan Wu, co-founder and CEO of Cavalry. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I'm excited to get into some of the cool stuff you're working on. As always, going to start the show out just by asking you, what's the one-liner to set context about what it is you guys are building?
So with Cavalry, we basically help e-commerce brands automate the issues and customer service problems that AI agents cannot handle.
So I really want to spend most of the time digging into what it is that you're doing and how it's sort of different from what's already out there. However, you have a background as an operator. And when we met, you were the COO of a 9-figure brand called Touch of Modern. You know, I love it when operators kind of cross the other side and build things to solve their own pain points. And so maybe we could start there. Just what's the story of Touch of Modern and how did you get into ops?
Yeah, so Touch of Modern was the series of 3 pivots in trying to build a company. And we eventually end up building a pretty successful e-commerce brand. And then kind of my background, my interest was all around building the teams, building the processes, and kind of scaling the org. So I kind of fell naturally into the COO and operations role. But the role is pretty vast, right? So beyond merchandising operations, logistics, and fulfillment, I also led recruiting and finance and planning and analytics. So I have a pretty good breadth and understanding of everything related to e-commerce, scaling, and operations.
Total sidebar, but as I was kind of restocking your LinkedIn, I saw you spent 3 years as designer builder at Tomo Homes. What was that?
Yeah, I wanted to get into actually building homes. So I started building one home as kind of just like a project and test case, and then actually found that entire industry extremely dysfunctional. So I was planning to build a product in kind of construction, like construction software. That was right when the pandemic hit. So in the very early days of the pandemic, kind of construction and real estate took a massive dive and e-commerce blew up. So that kind of led us back into e-commerce software. And then, of course, the real estate market recovered as well, but too late.
I didn't realize there was such a tight dovetail between Tomo Homes and what you're doing now. That's really interesting. One other curious question before we just dive into the nitty gritty here. Why Cavalry as the name?
Well, so we rebranded recently and we wanted something that was a clean, simple word. I don't like all the made up words. And Cavalry it really reminded us of the concept of support, right? So that phrase, sending in the cavalry to help, was a big one. And then if you look in Google, there's no company that's ever actually been built with the name Cavalry. This is a pretty clean domain name.
That's cool. For me anyway, it definitely evoked, the cavalry coming over the hill to save the day. So
yeah, and even at Shop Talk, we had a lot of brands that thought they had heard of us, even though, of course, we just rebranded.
cool. Well, so I think maybe the way to set this up, because, again, it feels like you are doing something that's different, is to first talk about the landscape of what, one of your customers is facing today. And then we can sort of dive into well, where do you come in and how does that change things? So let's talk about a hypothetical customer. I'm assuming you can tell me if this is wrong about the ICP, but you're looking at the head of ops or CX at an 8 or 9-figure brand. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but we also do work with smaller brands and smaller clients. So we can range anywhere from brands that do 5 million in sales up to brands, we're just onboarding one that does 1 billion in sales.
What does their stack look like today before you come in?
Yeah, so if you think about it, especially since most people are now moving to Shopify as their commerce platform, is that Shopify has made it really easy with the App Store to be able to customize any functionality you want. The downside means, one, you have a lot of apps and software that have limited integrations that talk to each other. And two, the other downside is people don't realize, but that means every software you're using, you need to pay margin for them to be a business. So in like a standard e-commerce brand that's doing 8 to 9 figure, they've got so much software in their stack. You have your ticketing platform. Some have a separate knowledge base if they want more robust capabilities. You've got a returns platform, claims, warranty. Some people run tracking. And then a new one's order modification software. And a big trend this year is loyalty software. And then a lot of people are starting to look at chatbots, which may be separate than phone AI agents. And then a lot of bigger brands also run separate CSAT and NPS software, as well as like a QA system. So that's just like a ton of software just for that one slice of customer service.
And are most of these brands kind of splitting their actual support between people they hire, domestically or as their own employees, some sort of like call center type function, and now AI? What's the status quo there?
Yeah. So within the handling of customer issues, bigger brands have a whole triage system where you start your front line of defense typically is like a basic chatbot or a simple AI agent that handles simple questions. Then you have an outsourced team that is handling kind of basic issues, kind of common things you see every day. And then you have an escalated domestic team that is handling more complex issues or one-offs or exceptions. And this combine adds just a lot of extra complexity in the handoff.
And so maybe using sort of like different systems to manage different teams as well, or
Well, more it's a fragmented customer experience, right? So if you can imagine a customer, they might get passed off to multiple people depending on what their issue is. And then the people are working in multiple systems depending on what that issue is.
and you mentioned there's like kind of a point solution for everything, but there is kind of like a rebundling happening, right? Like all the returns platforms are trying to be everything post purchase, right? Whereas they might have just been separate companies before. They've either sort of built or bought those capabilities. Where do you see the gaps though?
Yes. So there's starting to be more bundling on post purchase software. But the thing that we talk about a lot is, as you just kind of alluded to, return software was built a long time ago. It was architected before the world of generative AI, right? So if people were building that stack fresh today, it would look very different. A big thing is how does that post purchase software fully connect with AI to be able to create a more seamless customer experience?
What are the things that they're telling you, hey, we're not happy with how things are working for us that you guys are trying to fix?
Yes, I mean, for most of the brands we start conversations with is they believe there should be something better. There should be a product that is able to create a better customer experience, handle and automate more issues, and really help free up their team's time, especially in today's market where budgets are getting cut and people are looking to do more with less.
What are you seeing in terms of like response rates that existing customers are getting with their AI platforms versus like what you are able to achieve?
So, from what we've heard from brands that are coming from another product, maybe like a Gorgias AI or Sienna, is that for the most part, they're seeing maybe 15 to 20% in deflection, maybe a little higher depending on how many questions versus issues come in for that brand. Versus when we work with a brand, we'll typically handle 60 to 70, maybe up to 80% of their customer service volume because our big emphasis is being able to handle more complex order problems and order issues for brands.
Wow, that's like a huge jump up. I think that's maybe a great segue to talk about like, okay, what is Cavalry? What are you building? What does it do? And how does it work? So could you just take us on like a quick tour of the product? What have you guys built and how does it slot into a user's existing stack, right? Like what does it integrate with versus what does it replace?
Sure. Well, let me take a step back and kind of outline my co founder's thesis on this, which was there are actually two issues that come into e commerce customer service, right? And people kind of think about them together, but they're actually two completely separate problems. The first one is people are reaching out because they have a question, right? They have a policy question, a product question, order question, or like a product recommendation question. And these are areas that the current chatbots and AI agents today are well suited for, right? You're essentially looking up knowledge that exists within a knowledge base, within the product catalog, or within people's internal thoughts or even historic tickets to answer that question elegantly for the customer. The secondary problem is people are also reaching out to customer service because they have a order problem or order issue. This can range anywhere from delivery issues, product issues, returns, exchanges, promo code issues. And these are much more complex issues that today usually get passed up to a human agent team. Now, AI agent companies technically have the capability to handle them, and they do this by predefined workflows. So someone has to create a predefined workflow based on what they think the issue coming in is, and then plan out how they want to resolve it. The downside about this approach from my co-founder's thesis is that that's not how a human agent helps a customer, right? That doesn't create the best experience. A human agent will take into consideration different parts of the situation, the problem, along with the customer, their history, their behavior, what they're even asking for, as well as the product, the status of it, the shipment status, as well as the brand's policies themselves to find the optimal resolution for that customer. This creates a much more dynamic system rather than a predefined workflow, which means we can actually more flexibly help a customer, resulting in higher satisfaction. This dynamic policy engine is our core focus because it's able to fully resolve these different issues based on the actual unique situation at hand.
So maybe one way of just making this really concrete to start is like, okay, I've got my existing software stack, which is a bunch of point solutions, right? I've got my help desk, I've got my AI agent, I've got my whatever, or maybe some of those things are bundled together. But either way, I've got existing solutions. What do you guys come in and integrate with and pull data from? What do you guys replace? How would I think about it like that?
So the two key pieces that we integrate with is one, the e-commerce platform, so typically like a Shopify, and two, the ticketing platform, something like a Zendesk or Gorgias. And then the next area people think about is essentially replacing their chatbot or AI agent, as well as their human agents. That's the core areas that we focus on, which is what are the human agents still doing today? What are those issues that they're tackling? And bringing our resolution software and policy engine to understand the logic on how their human agents are resolving these issues to replicate it and fully automate it.
If I have a returns platform that I'm using today, or any of the other sort of point solutions you mentioned, have you built like a fully integrated software suite that replaces those things?
So it depends on the brand's preference, right? So if they want to keep their existing stack, like returns platform or claims platform, we can do what a lot of their human agents will do, which is redirect customers to those portals. But we also have a fully integrated vertical stack that if they want, they can use our complementary returns and claims platforms.
Any other things like that that you sort of built in, integrated into the product apart from returns and claims, or?
Beyond returns and claims, we also have a full native tracking platform as well as order modifications.
It's interesting you're talking about like going and analyzing what the human agents are doing and then figuring out how to automate around them, right? Like what does that process look like? Like how long does it take to get onboarded? What does your onboarding process look like? And what are you actually doing to be able to make that leap from like 15, 20% resolution to 60, 70, 80%?
Our onboarding process is typically about 1 month, where we help a brand essentially train the AI agent from start to finish. So rather than the older concepts, which is basically someone puts a lot of upfront work, adding all the knowledge, creating all these workflows, and just throwing out the AI agent to see what happens, we take a very iterative process that matches kind of like the human experience, which it's all about training it on different types of issues and layering on more and more complex issues over time. This allows us to refine the experience as we go and add a lot more breadth in terms of what the agent is capable of doing.
If you were to describe the difference between what you're doing and what the existing software out there do, what is the special sauce, or like what is the most novel thing that you have sort of come up with that allows you to like make this leap?
Our core feature is essentially our policy engine. So if you think about for customer service, today that's typically stored in a Word document, right? That's the training manual that you give to a human agent to understand how to solve different issues. Most companies today try and replicate that with predefined workflows versus actually just having a policy engine that's flexible and can dynamically figure out the best resolution for each problem. It's just like a fundamentally different approach to solve the same problem.
So instead of having, 1,000 rigid and deterministic workflows built in behind, a chatbot or whatever it is, you have a more flexible understanding of what a customer's policies are, what the sort of desired outcomes are, and the engine can sort of pull different levers or access different pieces of, software within the stack in order to achieve the right outcome. Is that like the right read back?
Yeah, basically. I mean, what we hear from brands is at the end of the day, the bigger you get, they find it increasingly unscalable to continuously create workflows. As they grow, there's too many edge cases, too many scenarios that they're trying to accommodate, as well as even plan for all the escalation cases. It's just too overwhelming. And over time, that rigid system will break, right? Or a customer gets stuck in a loop that they're very frustrated in. And that's what you're trying to avoid. The whole point of customer service at the end of the day is to help solve the customer's problem and not make them more frustrated.
That's a super clear way of putting it. Thank you. And it's a fairly young company, but as you mentioned earlier, you're already closing 7, 8, 9, 10-figure brands. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we know we have the best product. So it's really just showing people. So the best part of our sales process and what brands appreciate the most is not only do we give a free trial, but we actually give brands time. We give them an AI engineer that sits as part of their team that will actually take them through the full onboarding and configuration process. This allows them to fully see and realize the value of our product without the time suck of hours and days creating workflows to only get partway there.
So you'll actually fly an engineer out to sit with their CX team and just watch how things are happening and configure the software for them.
Well, I mean, now with Zoom, we can do it virtually. But yes, the same idea is they basically sit as part of their team, help with configurations, help with the refinement, because that's actually a very big thing. It's not going to be perfect the first day, right? It's an iterative process that over time it gets to the level that they're looking for.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, they can be there, and it's like closing the feedback loops between when something breaks and when it can actually be fixed. You can move on to the next thing.
Yes, and the other thing we do is we maintain joint Slack channels with all the brands we work with, and our CTO sits on every single channel. So he hears directly from brands what they're talking about, what they're looking to add on next for new features and functionality, and we deploy things very quickly.
I want to zoom out a little bit here and just talk kind of about like what you've learned through this process. I mean, you at this point have seen CX orgs at a bunch of really great brands. You have seen people who do it really well, and you've probably seen people who don't do it so well. Is there anything that you think like best in class companies do as part of their customer experience that like everyone else doesn't? What's special about the best brands? What are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, this sounds extremely obvious and everyone knows it, but it's very true in that the best brands really focus on essentially playing the long game. The most valuable thing in e-commerce is building the brand, right? And I can say at Touch of Modern, we didn't probably focus as much as we should have on building the brand and on really taking care of our customers versus trying to save money where we could. But if you build a strong brand, that inherently is the best value driver. And so the best brands we see are the ones that always try and take care of the customer and create a positive experience. They're not trying to nickel and dime or trying to save money or trying to be very frugal with refunds or replacements. That they're very generous because they know that even if a customer leaves them, if they have a good experience, they may not come back, but that they may tell their friends that they had a good experience. So one of the brands we're onboarding right now is a personal care company called Harry's. Their number one CX metric is NPS because they know that the most important thing long term for them is that everyone has a positive association with the brand and of the products.
I understand why, especially everyone's margins are getting crushed right now. Like the idea of being extra generous with your policies, maybe leaving the ambiguous situations in favor of the customer rather than the company, like that can be quite painful. How do you think about that? On the one hand, you've got like immense margin pressure hitting everyone, tariffs, the fraud being another huge contributing factor. I think that like a lot of CX teams are dealing with right now, social engineering, more and more sophisticated forms of e-commerce fraud. How do you think about that from like a system setup perspective? And how do you think about that from like a brand perspective? Like brands do have to defend themselves.
Yeah, I mean, one is, yes, there's definitely thin margins, and that definitely doesn't help with things. And as I said, the challenge is it's very easy to be less generous and pull back because you're trying to preserve margin. So in the short term, that's a great idea, but in the long term, it does cost you, right? So it depends on how much are you investing into the long term. In many ways, you have to think about that as investing in the company rather than just pure operating. And then your second point, there's definitely a growing increase in fraud, especially in the world of customer service. They're becoming more sophisticated. There are really great solutions out there, right? Most fraud systems are focused on kind of order placement, credit card fraud, credit card processing, but there is very little, if any, fraud engines on the customer service side. So one thing that we do is part of the Cavalry system is we have an internal fraud engine that we will actually monitor for customer behavior, repeat behavior. There's this concept of giving customers, call it a one-time courtesy, that a lot of brands will do. But the problem with that is what's the system that's tracking these one-time courtesies, right? Versus with software and with AI automation, we can actually systematize the concept of one-time courtesies and base it based on the value of that customer so we can be more methodical about it so people can't abuse the system.
Yeah, like what was once a note 14 tickets back in Zendesk, you can actually just keep it the front line. Where do you see the space going? I mean, you've got so many factors like AI and agents continue to get better. You do have a bunch of platforms starting to bundle up things that once were point solutions. We have this issue of fraud, as we mentioned. Like in your crystal ball, like 2 to 3 years from now, how is CX different for customers and how is it different for brands?
Our big hypothesis is that the AI model infrastructure layer is going to be commoditized, right? So the ability to answer questions well is fully commoditized. Our hypothesis is that the ability to handle more complex customer problems, this resolution software layer, is going to be increasingly valuable because it's not only a layer that sits for AI agents, it's also for human agents as well, right? So one thing brands will see is that there's inconsistency in how human agents resolve issues, and there's not a whole lot of good tracking on that or when agents break policy or if they do things incorrectly. So I think there's going to be a lot of value you see there. The other core area we see is a future where customer service starts to be able to treat customers differently. So I personally think Amazon already does this today because my Amazon customer experience is very different than my friends. But I think you're going to see a future where you can use AI to actually be able to give personalized resolutions based on the forecasted and expected LTV of that customer and be able to really hone in on exactly what you're doing there.
Personalization feels like it is just going to be a huge theme for e-commerce going forward. And yeah, like the CX piece is obviously one of the big areas where you can do that. What's the feature or capability on your roadmap that you're just like the most excited about being able to get to, whether it's in tomorrow or in 6 months or in 6 years? Like, what are you dying to build as part of this product?
Yeah, our most exciting feature is basically the most robust phone agent for e-commerce. That is not just a triage system and not just answering simple questions, but has all the full capabilities to help resolve any complex problem that you can experience within email or live chats. Today, we haven't seen any phone system that comes close to that concept because they're, again, point solutions, right? You need to be a fully interconnected system in order to be able to hit that goal.
This is something you already have or that you're planning to build?
We have a prototype, but we need to commercialize it.
Yeah, some of the voice stuff that's happening is absolutely crazy. And I think you might have even given me a demo of the prototype in a previous call. It is super cool.
With phone, right, it's very easy to show a demo where you're just answering a question, it's talking back. It's incredibly difficult for actually to be able to help resolve customer problems. But that's why they're calling in, right? That's what you're trying to achieve.
That's awesome. Anything that you feel like we didn't cover off here or that you're excited to talk about with Cavalry?
I know a lot of brands are looking for how to bring AI agents within the org and how to automate more parts of their operational process. I think as they start looking for solutions, the one thing to keep in mind is look for things beyond just a simple wrapper to chat GPT. Essentially, the best products I'm seeing are the ones that are just building better software that wasn't possible before generative AI. And that's where you're going to see the best ROI and impact for the business.
I think that's a great piece of advice and probably a good place to end off. So thanks so much for joining us today, Jonathan.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to everyone listening. If you want to learn more about Cavalry, we'll link details in the show notes, and they've got a verified page on the StartOps directory. Catch you next episode.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is produced by StartOps, a growing collection of resources for operations leaders at e-commerce brands. A few of the things we built include a growing, vendor-free Slack community for operators to ask their most important questions and get answers from trusted peers, a job board that curates jobs from 1,500 modern brands, a media hub that includes this podcast as well as articles and templates on a variety of operations topics, and a comprehensive directory of the software and services used by our community members. If you want to learn more, head to startops.network. And to keep up with the latest information from StartOps, or catch the most recent episodes of Blue Ocean, follow the StartOps page on LinkedIn or subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening and hope to catch you next episode.